right, now it's time for When Monet Meets Debussy. Every Wednesday, Christine comes and joins us to tell us about art and culture and everything in between. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing quite well, yeah. I've had a great day. I took a little nap in the middle, so
you had
I'm
a
in
nap?
a good mood. Yeah.
You know, we were just talking about things that you can learn from children, and taking a nap is definitely one of them. I still try to keep that practice up as well.
Yeah, I think all of us need some rest.
At least, yeah, especially on these, I don't know, kind of rainy days. But, you know, I am in the mood to talk about art. I've been waiting for this all week, and I hear you have something special for us this week.
I do. So I visited an exhibition this past week at the Busan Museum of Art in Santam City. It's titled 끝이 없는 시작, or Endless Beginning. And it's quite an ambitious exhibition showcasing more than 150 works of art by the second and third generation of artists in Busan back in the 60s and 70s.
Wow, 150 works. You know, that is very ambitious. Oftentimes you go to an exhibit, maybe they have 10, even 20, but 150 is quite the feat to put together.
It really is. And it's on until September 8th, so you can go visit it yourself after listening to our show tonight. The exhibition is divided into 6 sections, and it follows the artistic movements toward abstraction. At the time, artists were searching for a unique voice representative of the Korean ethos, and you can learn a lot about what artists must have been thinking about going through in Busan during the 60s and 70s.
You know, I was thinking about that. That was quite a tumultuous time, 60 years ago, where Korea was at. And honestly, I don't know too much about it, but I'm interested, and I'm sure I can learn a lot of the history through the visual context.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is really exciting to, learn about the history through the culture. And, we can still sort of experience the similar we can't completely understand them, but we can experience emotions and have emotional or visual conversations with these artists at the time. And artists then in Korea, they were in search of ways to understand this changing world around them. They were coming out of colonialism and then war, and they were going into a rapidly developing export-driven economy. Korea was becoming very, very rich quickly, and they were determined to distinguish themselves as a country on the global stage through forming a national identity. So a lot of the news at the time talked about what does it mean to be Korean? What's the Korean spirit? So these are things that artists were thinking about as well.
Well, when I think about that, I do think about a lot of art coming out of Seoul, but what can you tell us about Busan art in particular?
Yeah, so Busan is also interesting because a lot of Busan at the time was just rural, and they had a strong agricultural society. They were struggling a lot with poverty. So a lot of these artists, they couldn't keep their artworks, unfortunately. So these artworks on display are the ones that we have left now.
Oh.
But they also, Busan served as sort of like a refugee city during the war. So they have memories from growing up as a child, from being children of refugees and so on. And they were trying to figure out their own voice. They were using abstraction to talk about things that inspired them, like childhood memories and nature. And they created a lot of contemplative and interior expressions. So one thing that struck me particularly was a special section dedicated to Open and Close series by the artist Kim Hong-seok. It's titled Kepe in Korean, and I've discussed this series with the curator, so let's listen to the interview.
All right.
Please briefly tell us about this exhibition.
네, 이번 전시는 저희 미술관 개관 당시부터 이제 수행해온 부산 미술사의 정체성을 확립하는 전시 중에 하나입니다. 부산의 근현대 미술 형성과 발전을 함께한 부산 미술 1세대 작가들의 활동과 그리고 근대 미술과 현대 미술, 구상 미술과 추상 미술의 가교 역할을 하면서 부산 현대 미술 형성에 영향을 미친 2, 3세대 작가들의 작품 특성을 저희가 펼쳐 보이는 전시입니다.
This exhibition is part of the museum's efforts since it opened to organize Busan's art history and establish its art historical identity. Modern and contemporary art emerged and developed in Busan with the first generation of Busan artists, while the second and third generations served as a bridge, connecting modern art to contemporary art and figurative art to abstract art. The exhibition showcases the characteristics of the second and third generation of Busan artists. The exhibition includes a special section devoted to the artworks of Kim Hong-seok. What kind of artist was Kim Hong-seok, and what can you tell us about his artwork titled Open and Shut?
저희가 같은 시대에 활동했던 작가분들의 이야기를 들어보면 작품에 대한 조언을 주변 분들에게 자주 구했다고 하셨어요. 그러니까 작품을 제작할 때 방법적인 고민을 많이 했던 작가가 아니었나 생각이 됩니다. 그것을 통해서 주변 작가들과 소통하면서 풀어나갔던 것으로 생각됩니다. 그리고 김홍석 작가는 작품의 제작 시기나 서명, 작품 제목을 거의 적혀있지 않는데요. 이것은 작가가 작품 자체의 의미를 두었던 것으로 보입니다. 특히 개폐는 1970년대 초부터 쓰인 작품을 하셨는데요. 실로 하는 드로잉이라고 생각을 하시면 될 것 같습니다. 이 개폐 시리즈는 선생님이 자신의 입지를 세운 작품이자 선생님의 생애를 대표하는 작품이기도 합니다. 개폐는 캔버스에다가 실을 바느질하는 작품이에요. 어떻게 보면 실이 가지고 있는 유연성 같은 특징을 가장 잘 드러내는 방법들을 구현한 작품이라고 보시면 됩니다.
According to other artists active at the time, Kim often liked to seek their advice on his artworks. He seems to have put a lot of thought into his art-making process and found solutions by talking to other artists working around him. His works rarely have his signature, year, or title written on them, suggesting that he was less interested in such formalities or details and focused more on the artwork itself. Kim started the Open and Close series in the early 1970s. The series consists of drawings made with threads by sewing threads on a canvas. They highlight the unique characteristics of the material, such as the thread's soft and pliable quality. The series established his artistic practice and is also representative of his life. Why did artists prefer abstract art in the 1960s and 70s?
60, 70년대 부산 작가들은 그러니까 국내미술대학에서 정규 교육을 받은 세대들이 부산 미술의 흐름을 주도해 나가는 시기입니다. 학교 교육을 가장 통해서 그리고 다양한 미술 잡지를 통해서 더 많은 정보를 접하게 되었고 그 당시에 서구에서 유행하고 있었던 수상 미술을 접하게 된 거죠. 근데 이전 세대와는 다른 조형 이념을 추구하고도 했고 그 돌파구가 여러 가지 경로를 통해 접하게 된 수상 미술이었다고 생각됩니다. 근데 이 시기를 수상 미술을 선호했다 하기는 약간 단분적인데요. 새로운 미술 경향으로서 두드러진 움직임이었다고 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그리고 이 시기에는 추상뿐만 아니라 한국의 주체성과 자생성을 고민하며 새로운 시도들을 해나갔던 시기였고요. 그리고 한 걸음 더 나아가서 실험적이고 전위적인 미술을 하고자 했던 시기였습니다.
The second and third generations of Busan artists who received formal education at domestic art schools led the artistic movements in the 60s and 70s. They were exposed to a wide range of sources through their education and various magazines which showcased abstract art popular in the West at the time. However, while abstract art emerged as a prominent movement at the time, it was not the only movement. Artists also tried new things while trying to figure out what Korean identity and autonomy looked like. What can viewers take away from this exhibition?
관람하신 분들이 공통적으로 말씀하시는 것들이 부산에 이런 작가들이 있는지 몰랐다. 그리고 좋은 작품들이 왜 이제까지 알려지지 않았을까라고 말씀들을 하십니다. 이처럼 이제 사실이나 구상에 대해서는 많이 알려져 있지만 추상미술에 대해서는 많이 생소하게 느껴지는데요. 이것이 한국미술사는 영역에서 중앙 중심적으로 역사가 기술되고 지역 여사가 조금 배제된 부분들이 있다고 생각을 해요. 그래서 이 부분들을 관람객들이 볼 수 있는 부분들이 가장 좋은 것이라 생각을 하고요. 그리고 당시 평론이나 포스터를 이 자리를 통해서 볼 수가 있어요. 그러면은 이것이 종합적인 당시 문화를 볼 수 있는 기회가 된 것이라고 생각을 합니다.
Many visitors say they didn't know Busan had such great artists and wonder why such great artworks are not well known yet. What is most important about this exhibit is that it shows works by Busan artists who have not been highlighted in Korean art history so far. It also recognizes that Korean art history should not be focused only on the capital region, but should include the art history of other regions as well. There are posters and art reviews from the era included in the exhibit that show design and publishing culture at the time, as well as art criticism. By exhibiting works from the 60s and 70s, what do you hope to tell us?
저희가 전시 서문에서도 언급했듯이 미술사가 중앙중심으로 쓰여진 게 이때까지 현실이었습니다. 이 전시를 통해서 배제되고 소외됐던 지역 작가들에 대한 관심과 그리고 자료 수집, 연구의 필요성을 다시 저희가 인식을 하고 중앙 중심의 편중적인 어떤 역사 서술 태도에 다시 한번 이의를 제기하면서 그리고 한국 미술사가 앞으로 입체적인 조명의 기회가 되었으면 하는 것이 이 전시의 바람입니다.
Art history has been written around the capital region until now. The museum wants to acknowledge the need for interest in and research on local artists who have been excluded or marginalized in the larger discourse. They want to once again raise their objection to the current approach to art history and hopes that this will serve as an opportunity to present a fuller picture of Korean art.
That was quite the journey you took for that interview. I really enjoyed the history and just the fact that there's so much there. I mean, we mentioned 150 works. You focused on a particular artist in certain, right?
Yeah, so the series, they had a special section dedicated to Kim Hong-seok, and he actually has made I believe over 90 works in this series that started in the early 70s. But they've decided to narrow it down to less than 10 works to show for the exhibit. And in particular, I really liked, we talked a little bit about this in the interview, but the pliant quality of the threads, they feel very organic. Mm-hmm. And against the brushstrokes in his artworks, which are a little bit more, intentional and gestured. And so the threads just working in with the canvas and the way that he thinks about painting is quite interesting, I believe.
Well, I can't believe all of these works. I mean, they're from, 50, 60 years ago, and they still are very prevalent even to this day.
Yeah, actually, he started making this work during a time where this loosely defined movement called 단색화, which is the Korean monochrome movement, was forming at the time. And this series sort of fits into some of the trends that we see in 단색화. And 단색화 has actually become very popular on the international stage recently. So we see a lot of buyers from the US, from London, from all over the world that are interested in investing in Korean paintings from the 70s.
Is it because of the kind of minimalism about it, or is it just because it's very intriguing and leaves a lot to think about?
Yeah, I think both. So minimalism was also forming in the U.S. as a prominent movement during the same period. But minimalism, in a way, is all about reducing paintings to their basic forms and shapes. So it's a very reductionist. Whereas 단색화 is a lot more poetic, I found. Oh. And a lot of them, they use repeated gestures. They're very muted. They're subtle. They have a sort of depth, and they all kind of harken back to different sort of philosophies, like Eastern philosophies or meditative practices.
Yeah, it's a little different shade of minimalism, but I like the repetitive nature. I think that brings a lot to it. And again, it makes it seem like it's poetry coming alive. So, these artists really did have a lot to offer. Did you kind of get a chance to research or read into anything else that they wanted to say themselves?
Yeah, so I wanted to, in particular, read a quote that Kim Hong-seok said about the open and closed the Kepe series. And he said, "It's perfectly natural for humans to remember and even more so to breathe. As long as humans are alive, the breath we take in and out, while it may differ in rhythm, large or small, are ultimately similar with minute differences. Memories also grow from such repetition. most of our memories that are left with us are probably from such deeply ordinary repetitions of past routines. The memories embedded in my work come from the various day-to-day experiences of joy and distress and moments of great happiness.
Wow, man,
And,
he really does seem like he is living that kind of, what was that, Dangsekwan, the minimalist lifestyle?
Yeah, well, he talks a lot about memories, and in particular, the reason why he decided to do these thread paintings or thread drawings is that he remembers his mom sewing when he was a young child, and he talks about that as well. He says, the sight of my mother waiting for her husband while sewing under a dimly lit kerosene lamp has stayed with me positively even after 50 years of living. The trails of thread I sewed up from the back of the canvas symbolize such memories reflected in my small eyes as a child. And so the canvas, the vessel of my memories, is an imprint of my life.
Wow. And, I have to say that as much as it is to describe these, it's very possible for our listeners to go and check this out. Again, it's it's showing at the Busan Museum of Art in Centum City.
And it's
until
up
when?
Until September 8th.
September 8th, so you have quite a bit of time. And, it's just 150 works. There's so much there to see and experience. And you just got a little taste of it right now. And there's so much depth there. And again, it's from the 60s and 70s. And he was living day to day doing this. It gets a real flavor of what it was like to be alive back then and experience the movements that happened and the culture and history. So thank you so much for coming on and bringing us this amazing artwork. We'll see you back here next week.